This week's Multiple Choice Monday is about the reactions of Group 2 elements and also some trends in their compounds. So, the one thing to really spot whenever you have a question which is really about periodic trends and chemical reactions is that we need to look for either the top or the bottom of a group. So that's really helpful in a multiple choice question because we have 4 options here, and one thing we know is that if we're talking about something that's most likely to be the most reactive and to produce particular trends, then we are looking for either the element at the top of the group or the element at the bottom of the group, because otherwise we really couldn't tell if it was just somewhere in the middle. So that means that I can immediately eliminate calcium and strontium, and I'm either going to look for magnesium at the top or barium at the bottom of group 2. Now technically beryllium is at the top of group 2. We don't count it really as a group 2 metal because most of the things that beryllium does are not typical of group 2 metals. It's not a particularly metallic element. Okay, so we have so many clues in this question. We have reacts vigorously, meaning it reacts a lot, and we know that reactivity increases as you go down group 2 because of increased number of shells and shielding, and the electrons are easier to lose, lower ionization energy. So almost from that I could tell that it was barium because it's at the bottom of the group. Let's just look at the other trends though and what we're expected to know in case we were given different information. So soluble hydroxide, people get really messed up between the solubility of group 2 compounds and like which one's which. So the solubility for group 2 is that the solubility of hydroxides increases down the group, and the solubility of sulfates decreases down group 2. So you don't really want to be able to explain that. It's actually incredibly difficult to explain. You do need to learn it. So how can we learn it? Because it's really easy to get switched around in our heads when we've got 2 completely opposite trends for 2 what seems like fairly random ions. So one little way to remember it is that the bigger the difference in size between the cation and the anion, the more soluble it's likely to be. So this is just a rule of thumb, and it is just a rule of thumb for group 2 compounds, but it just so happens that it works. So hydroxide is a small ion. Hydrogen is tiny, oxygen has only got 2 shells, so it's a relatively small anion. Sulfate is a big anion. So sulfate ions take up a lot of room, much bigger than hydroxide ions. So what that means is if I want a hydroxide to be soluble, I want to put it with a big cation because there's a bigger difference in size. And because sulfate is a big anion, it's more likely to be soluble with a small cation. The last thing to remember, when it says forms a white precipitate when neutralized by sulfuric acid, don't get hung up on the acid part. It's the sulfate ion that is part of sulfuric acid, and it is barium that is used to test for sulfate ions, and the reason it is because barium sulfate is very insoluble and produces an obvious white precipitate. We're going to choose the least soluble group 2 element to do that with. So all of our clues were there. You've just got to spend a little time going over flashcards and remembering your different trends in group 2. So, revision materials, including some links to some Quizlet sets which will help you with your test for ions and different trends, can be found on my website. And if you haven't already done so, sign up to my free chemistry revision club, which you can do. It'll be a pop-up on my website if you go there, and you get different material every week, whether you're in year 12 or year 13. And of course, if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, then you'll get notified of new videos for chemistry revision every single week.